Hello, everybody. Welcome to another meeting of the Raleigh-Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and tonight we're going to be talking about automating AWS. And our speaker tonight is my esteemed co-host, Phil Bossman. Phil, are you going to be on camera, or are you just using the room?
Oh, I guess I can do that too.
Hey, Phil, how are you?
How are you?
How are you after your travels to Summit and returning?
It's good. You know, we had a great time. One of the real values of Summit is the community. Certainly the lighting demos was I got some feedback back from that. That's always everybody's favorite part. It's that giving back to the community, so the people who are in the Summit itself, and just the hallway tracks, as we call from there. There's always great content. That's why the speakers are brought in to do that. But then you get extra content. It's kind of like the icing on the cake. So that's part of the best part that I think.
I am a little jealous here in the stories. I wasn't able to attend this year, but Phil has come back renewed and reinvigorated and ready to share. And so I see tonight we're going to be talking about automating AWS. And you say it's a practical guide. So this is like no filler, right to the details, right? Shows you the real world stuff. What about, are you running this in a test lab?
I set up an organization in AWS and kind of, you get some free credits.
This is a live environment.
This is full live environment.
So when we see errors, we're seeing.
That's the point at this point. And so, we'll get to a little bit further down the road, but the idea is that, hey, everybody, hey, what I wanted to do is basically, at work, I use AWS and I use PowerShell all day long. And the story goes is that, you talk to some people and you start interacting with it, and they're watching your screen and you're trying to help them. And they go, hey, so when are we going to have like a lunch and learn here in the office? Well, I don't have that opportunity in the office because that's the different topic for a lunch and learn. But here in this group, well, now this is my opportunity to simply, hey, I'm going to just present, and this is my meeting. So I'm going to talk about the things that I want to talk about and things that I think are valuable. And it's going to be just a practical guide. Here's how you set some things up. This is how you use PowerShell. Here's the values from it. And then beyond that is that I hope that it's also this question for those who are out there and on the call is to say, hey, what about this and what about that, right? And so you kind of use, Claude Code and AI to help me give a story, give me some examples, because that's also oftentimes the hardest part is that how do you use it in a live environment? Well, I stood up a live environment going, all right, well, where do you get some sample data from? Where do you go from there? Yeah. And so at that point, we're just going, hey, can I stop this VM? Can I do that? Well, what happens if I do some things with this S3 bucket? What if we delete it? How many do we have? All this kind of stuff. So it'll just be an interactive discussion. We have kind of a guide, but hopefully it's a conversation and just let's ask questions, stop as often as you want. And I'm hoping that we get a lot of content from there.
Okay, so we're going to get started with that just in a second here. And so I have a lead in that I can give you. So our group is very Microsoft focused in the past, right? And so natural areas are things like Active Directory and obviously Azure. And Azure with PowerShell for a lot of people also means the Graph API. So how does that relate to AWS? Where's the starting point for automating with AWS?
AWS is just another one of those hypervisors. And so a lot of the lessons that you know with Azure and the VM perspective, the infrastructure itself, the platform, it all just relates. Everybody does something slightly different. So some of the well-architected framework exists. They just call it slightly different. Hey, over here it's called a subscription. Over there it's called an account. And over here it's called an EC2. And over there it's just called a VM, right? And so, hey, we have security groups. We have NSGs, right? It's roughly the same concepts. Identity is kind of similar. They use the same terms, but otherwise it's roughly the same. But some of their access controls are slightly different. So it is, there's a paradigm shift there.
So different terminology, but similar concepts. And so if you're familiar with the Entra world or Azure in general, it's not a far stretch to be able to follow along and pick up the common things that we're going to be doing in AWS. And so are you going to be talking, what parts of AWS are you going to be looking at tonight? Like infra and storage, identity, what are the areas that you're going to?
I'm hoping all of that. Okay. So I'm going to start with identity, and then just how do you access it in other places? We'll start in identity. Then we'll move on to just even S3, which is their storage accounts. Like how do you, a lot of people, I need to put stuff in, I need to put files, I need to download files, how to do that, just that ideal idea. Then we can do some EC2 stuff, basically interfacing with VMs. Then I'm not sure what else with that. Oh, there's Lambda, which is Azure Functions. So Lambda is Azure Functions. Hey, how do you push something up to an Azure function? How do you call it Azure function or a Lambda function? And then from there, just even identity and, well, IAM, identity and access management. So the premise of how do you give access to things and what are things from there? So we just talked about that.
Okay, sounds like a lot of stuff to cover. All right, so hope we enjoy this. We're going to hand it over to Phil and we'll get started.
So, righty. We will, I'm going to steal screen and we will go from there. So I think the first point at this point is that AWS and Azure themselves have this premise of, hey, I have a CLI. The AWS CLI, well, they then wrap that. There is components that get built, and there is a module for AWS that basically calls the same APIs. So if you're using the AWS CLI in the console, AWS S3, all of these things, just the CLI, it's all the same, but it is effectively the same using the CLI itself. So there is a way to install the AWS CLI. Winget installs the AWS CLI. But this is the PowerShell way, and I prefer the PowerShell way because, as you kind of saw at this point here, just going to look, actually just one in there. But we'll look at, in refreshing token. So this is just an SSO token.
I just want to remind you, I think the last time we did a meeting here, that that screen is slower, a little bit delayed from where you were. So
yeah, so we'll just have to. Yeah. I'll have to slow down when I'm presenting up there because that is slightly slower. All right. So the premise being is that this will not go. Show me the list of buckets. But here we go. Here it is. It has a premise, and it comes back to if you're using the CLI, is how do you log in? And it says, hey, I can't find a credential. Well, let's look at what credentials are inside of AWS, right? And actually, at this point, we're starting with what's this environment look like today? So what this looks like, well, as we kind of talked about before, is we actually created an entire organization, right? So I created an organization and I made it multiple accounts. I did say earlier is that within Azure and with AWS and other cloud platforms, it is best practice. It is the well-architected framework. It is to create multiple accounts because accounts can be free at that point, right? It doesn't cost you anymore just to have another subscription or another account, right? And in doing that, you then get boundaries control, security controls, a bunch of other stuff like that, right? And so in this example, hey, there is, just randomly created a web account, basically production data. Hey, we created a dev account that is the dev in the shared environment. And so the developers can use that. Well, then there's this, and again, the welcome to the framework. Hey, there's an account where all of your audit stuff goes. So we're just, there's other things, maybe we might get to that, which then at a high level can just forward all the logs over to the audit group, forward all the logs into logging, right? And so those other teams can just have it there. And so there's nothing that people in the prod account can do because all their logs are getting shipped over there and it's just controlled at that point. And so then we can hold on to this. It doesn't get billed that way. It doesn't get organized that way. And so we can organize things by that web services and go from there. So that's kind of where we're gone from there. There's a structure called OUs, but that's a little deeper into the weeds for AWS itself. This is premise as to where we are, what this looks like. Actually, yeah, we'll actually log in. I'm going to actually just call command like called invoke SSO login, but the reason I'm doing that is because it will force me to log in. And we're going to use my phone because it's going to MFA me. And again, I just came from Summit, so I created most of this for Summit to kind of do some demos. MFA this. So, and just because, hey, it's okay if it happens, but if you see a password or we see a, hey, I'm putting something in, you're like, oh my gosh, credentials, I don't give a crap. Because you know what's going to happen? All this is getting turned down about probably 24 hours from now. So that's the beauty of some of this cloud world, is that, you know, you also saw at one point, I ran part of this demo, a version of this demo back in January, and that I built it, tore it down, and then tried to build it again right before the meeting. And AWS said, no, you've reached your quota. You can't have any more. Oh, and so it didn't let me log in. And so I couldn't build most of it. So we had a fun time before. So this is also what that looks like, the multiple accounts at that point. So this is what it looks like for those multiple accounts as we kind of see at this point. So why did I want to get to that point? Where it went from there. So that's what, this is an entire organization at that point. Right. So what does it look like to actually, you know, go through that and look at the modules themselves? So AWS has a set of PowerShell modules. There's definitely a ton of information as far as where to get that, where to get the modules from. So if you're looking for documentation, they have documentation online for what that looks like. I'm just going to close this guy. Eating up into me. It's taking so slow. There he is. So if you are a person who likes to look at the individual modules themselves, documentation, there's a ton of documentation online for that. Why is that not painting? Oh, the record. Gosh. Is it frozen on that screen?
It seems very far behind, though it does seem kind of frozen. You know,
You see me slow, or you see prerequisite?
I'm seeing the exact same thing as on the screen, so.
yeah. Is it a connectivity issue? Or
I'm on my air card because the Wi-Fi was crazy once.
okay. I want to go off camera.
I mean, even your video, it's there. It's a little choppy though.
Presenting and it's not.
Right.
All right, let's see.
They have Wi-Fi in the room, but it's really cut down.
Okay.
What? Are we just now getting to that? All right, this is gonna be fun. Last time we were betting with the Wi-Fi or with the Wi-Fi. All right, so hopefully we can get to this stage. We'll go from there. We'll try and make it work. All right, so there are multiple ways. There is two separate module types. There is the, call it recommended module, which is the AWS Tools.star, and that's the top one on this list. What that means is that each individual component, every one of the 700 modules within AWS has its own module, right? And so we'll kind of see that eventually too. Find a module.
And I think that's something that AWS did a couple of years ago because the libraries were getting so big, because every service was in the library, that they split them up into individual components. So you didn't have to pull in so many dependencies.
And that's exactly
what to read an S3 bucket, right?
Yeah, AWS
So
was
there's-
definitely early on that. Microsoft had these gigantic modules for a while.
Yeah.
And they started splitting them up as well.
Yeah, so the number of modules that are currently the individual components, itself, there's 429 of them currently. And so that number will grow eventually. And you may also notice is that actually the version of most of these modules is 5.0.200. If I do get module AWS star list available, what's installed on my machine is 199. Well, that's because I installed it yesterday. So every single day they increment and they take any changes. And so it will always, there'll be a new version up in the PowerShell gallery every single day.
But generally speaking, is it worthwhile to stay on the latest rev, or if it works, you're okay for a while, you could stay a week or two behind? Or...
Oh, when I was playing with this before, I was at 149 and this was at 199 when I just like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go to 199.
Mhm.
So 2 days ago, I took the 189, right? And so that's why, but prior to, my machine just was at 145, right? And then prior to that, when I did this back in January, I think I was at 129, 127, I think. So they're always taking changes. And so what they do is they rebuild the entire suite every night effectively. So it's a nightly build. And what that means is that basically you get a new version. Now, whether you needed all those changes, you just.
But since every module seems to be updated, I'm sure there's some modules that probably don't necessarily update. They're just staying version.
Yeah, it could be that there are no effective changes, quote unquote, to the transfer module, right? But they just do a rebuild of the API itself, and so the entire two thing comes up. There is an installer for AWS as well, but it is go from there.
How do you find the quality of the documentation and the commandlets and the parameters that you can select in there compared? It's always been a sticking point with Azure and some of the Graph API modules and things like that, where very long commandlet names and sometimes parameters that don't match from get to set or something like that.
I found it's pretty, you have to understand what it is. It's generated from code, right? And so as you can also see is this point, is this one single module. And we're going to say measure. So just this SSO admin, just this one, just to connect to SSO is 79 commandlets, right? And so there is a fair good number of, but all of these just end up behind an API. And so it's the generated documentation from the API. So the similar problem that we, who are PowerShell experts, kind of fuss with graph, as this doesn't connect to that, this doesn't. I think AWS does a much better job of kind of keeping some of that connectivity between the two pieces, but they definitely have, I think they're much better, much further along than graph itself, because graph is just too big, right? Because they're just underneath that entire umbrella of MGG. The MG module is just where it is. So talked about showed back in code how to go find them, right? So I just say go get all the modules. I list them available, what version is there, and how many do we have installed on my machine. And this is the ones that I've only installed just so that we can do this demo. So premise is budget. Hey, so we need the budget module to actually create budgets. Cost Explorer, EC2, identity management. So that's IAM. Then Lambda, if you're using any Lambda, the other point that we talked about before, or Austin was saying, is that they broke it apart just because you don't need these other components, right? Why try to import and have available for you the X-ray module or the components, all 50-something of those, when you never need them? So why have them to install? So you just install the pieces you need and go from there. But if you're looking for which ones you need, again, that's where you come back to the API and figure out what that looks like. And so they do have a pretty good catalog of what the services are, and then you can go find it from there. So if you're looking for, how do I work from this? But at that point, when you're in AWS itself, so let's just choose a random service. So here we go. We're going to kind of deviate, and this is what I enjoy about PowerShell. We're just going to talk about it. And so certainly anybody who is online have any questions, let's talk through that. And so if you just go looking for any of these other things, of course, we're always in freaking Ohio. We're not in Ohio. Come on. We have Northern Virginia. So a lot of this other stuff comes along, but still. Oh, I don't wait because I don't have. I'm a developer. Either way, but there are other services, so you can go look for, cloud formation, right? And so these are all the different services, and you can go through and all the documentation. You can live inside of the console, and this is also, we'll eventually get to this idea of a lot of people look at AWS and they just see this console, and this is AWS to them. Well, I look at this and say, this is the web page that allows me to access AWS services behind the scenes. Well, but I also see this is one interface to that, and so is this, right? So is the PowerShell console, is because it's all the same as far as I'm concerned, right? Anything that you can do in the console, you should be able to do at the command line. Now, why is that good? Well, that's good because I can, click on identity and access management. We can play around with roles. We can play around with policies, and we can, hey, how many policies? What does this policy do? What does other things do? What can I create a user? How many users do we have? Right? So do I need to create a new user in this form? Well, then I just got to click through a bunch of buttons, and I need to understand, all right, I'm gonna sit here for 20 minutes while I'm just clicking around. Or I can write a script. I can just write it in a file and then just do it at scale. So we're working partly in that form. But the point being is that what modules you might need. The point is that, hey, you can come here and just choose any one of the services, and there's workspaces, and there'll be a module for workspaces if you go looking for it. And that's the one you're going to use. If you want to, you can look in the console, do your GUI stuff there, but then you can dump to the CLI or even PowerShell. It's where we want to be, right? Or even better is I can write a script and do all of that same variation at this point.
Is there documentation for each model, like individual documentation for all the, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, they're back to the documentation page, and you can probably say get EC2 instance. We can spell get. It's probably not the right exact best place because it's talking about just even pipelines itself. But there is an API reference somewhere here. Commandlet reference. There we go.
There it is. Yeah, I didn't see it before either.
There it is.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
So it's deep inside of this other reference. So I will take that and I'll stick that in chat. Or if somebody wants to do that, they can do that and put that into chat. But commandlet reference, and then they'll always all be here. Get EC2. I'm just going to be down here, EC2. So if you're in the PowerShell world, it's always the easiest thing to do. Simply everything starts with get, right? So this is the same documentation you're going to get from. So you kind of get this blob of content that it's always not the easiest thing, but because it's generated from code, it is there. But they do a fairly good job of connecting all the tissue together. And I found also is that they're at the bottom of this, it's in the PowerShell world, but the examples, this just looks like exactly like help itself. And so back to the same thing is help get C2 instance. You know what? I didn't import that module. So you get the same interface there. So this is the same documentation. So you can use the web if you wanted. You can also use the same premise of the online documentation. And it'll take you right to that same thing. And so this will take you directly to it, but that is still this is kind of a PowerShell way to do it. So we talked at one point, I think a couple months ago, about, you know, the Trinity for PowerShell: get command, get help, get member. So help is just a reference back to get help, right? So you can get help any commandlet, and if you put online, it has online help, it will basically take you to the online help, the online version of it. I kind of led right into before is that there are multiple versions, and you kind of talked about that. There is a broken out version of AWS and just the EC2, but there is this other one called Net Core. And it is the core. It is truly all of it together. So if you import that, you'll get all like 17,000 commandlets all in one. So if you didn't want to try to import them, as you saw me, I had to import it. I couldn't use the EC2 until I imported the module. It doesn't auto import expressly, so that why am I going to auto import, you know, all these different modules if I don't have to? So that's what the Net Core is for. So if you wanted to just keep it all in memory and keep it all available to you, this will, you know, auto-complete from you for any of those pieces. But it takes like 5 seconds just to import, right? Because it's importing 16,000 commandlets. All right, let's keep on going. Basically, let's actually play with some stuff. Any other questions while we're going along? I put here just the matter of like, hey, I couldn't, you know, run all the commandlets and show what's there, sorted what they are. We talked about the installation. These are all the pieces that we're going to play with eventually. What do we want to do? Kind of jumped in. I'm jumping all around, so this is going to be a lot of fun just to look from there. So I did talk about a little bit is I think it's the next one, we're going to talk about authentication. But the premise is I created an organization and I used something called Identity Center. And so, hey, we're going to take a unique identity and basically using, is that you? Oh, it's over there. I hear a voice. I hear the idea is that if you use Identity Center, if you have an organization, you have multiple AWS accounts. The premise is that I can create an Identity Center that is now managed across the organization, and I can manage other accounts using that as well. And so this is the organization it created from there. And if I open this up, hey, we're going to get this organization that is all the pieces itself. And so it is basically a unique access portal that is not the individual account themselves. All right, and I think, but you could just as well go to the one before. All right, and so just that single account, right? You can go to a unique account. That's AWS apps. AWS portal sign in. No, I want to sign out of all. Yeah, so you can go to each one individually and then, you know, put in the account ID and log in individually as we saw before. So if I copy this, come back here, put in the account number, say Phil, log in, and as we saw, we just logged into the console, or we will sign into the console. Yeah, line in as Phil, not as the SSO account. So now I'm logged in to the account using the local account, using the account that's local to the machine. So what we saw before is an identity management, is that there is this construct within AWS, because of all the subscriptions exist, there is you can create an identity that is in the identity center that is effectively assuming a role into this local account. And so that's what we kind of see at this point. So this is a local account, and that's who's currently logged in as. This guy over here, if I go to the same account, we'll see as well. We're going to open a new tab. I know it's kind of weird that why am I going through all this exercise and kind of talking about what AWS is? And I think it's important to talk about it because this helps you understand why some things work and some things don't work, right? So we still see the same users and that kind of stuff, but who I'm logged in as is I'm logged in as this admin in some other account using this other role. So I'm using a role from the management account to connect into this one. So that's unique in that fashion. It's effectively an SSO. So it's a single sign-on to this account using, and so here, this is the developer plus permission set for this account inside of this account. So all the same account, but what it's doing is that this is the account number that we're connecting from, and this is the permission set. And hopefully we'll talk eventually about what permission sets and how they work. But, all right, so where that is, what's the role permission set that we're connecting from? And then as we see before, there are 6 accounts underneath this other one. So they are effectively accounts, but there is a management account and then all these other stuff from there. What's it look like so using the AWS CLI, the STS is the Secure Ticketing Authority or something like that effect. It says, who am I? So it's the whole point is who you are. You'll also learn that in AWS, there's this structure for an ARN, AWS resource name, or I think that's what it stands for. But the point is that it's in AWS, what account it's on. I think this is the region, then the account number, then all the rest of the stuff. So this is an assumed role for here. That's just what it's saying. So if you'll get more familiar with AWS, you just look at this and you'll understand what all the components look like.
So Phil, question.
Yeah.
On line 53 there, and I see it at 50 in the commented thing. I see a pipe symbol and I see that's PowerShell, but on the left-hand side, that looks a little bit not very PowerShell-like, that AWS space STS space get called. So is that an AWS nomenclature for some of the default stuff that's the way it is?
And this looks just like that. Convert from JSON. Oh, but actually you create an identity. So STS caller identity. So now this get STS caller identity is that exact same get caller identity. You can see the one, there was a 1-for-1 relation to those two. So the reason I left this in here is just to say that, hey, so some of the stuff that you find later on for AWS CLI, and if you're looking for stuff, documentation you'll see is that, hey, there's a reference. And so you can, hey, I'm looking for something about caller and identities. Well, then if we're familiar with PowerShell itself, get command GCM is my shorthand for that. I can just do star caller, that's, caller ident. Hey, there you go. That looks right. So these are all the stuff within. There's some team stuff, but there's the one inside the security token service. That's what STS stands for. I don't even remember because it really doesn't even matter, right? But
so AWS has a couple of different languages of support. So you might see in the documentation written one way. There's a pretty easy way for you to identify the similar command to the matching command that would be in the PowerShell way of doing it.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I would tack on, like, you're going to see walkthroughs and stuff, and most of the time you're going to see CLI.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you translate that to, I want to do this in PowerShell, right? And this is a good way to to translate a command.
And we'll see eventually too, is that what we get back from this command in the CLI is just a JSON blob.
And CLI is Bash, like generally speaking, like what is
Yeah.
AWS own language or?
And it's just bash. Yeah.
Oh, it's a CLI that can live anywhere kind of that point.
I understand that, but I'm like, who's the target audience that those commands are being written for? Probably, Linux, probably admin crowd.
Windows
I guess.
DOS,
Just
Windows command line.
Yeah, I mean, I use it in Windows command line.
Yeah, Windows command line. It's any command line itself. It's a CLI. It's a true CLI. Similar with the AWS Azure CLI.
Mhm.
It can run in PowerShell, but the advantage at this point is that, hey, what comes out is just JSON blobs, right? And so if you're in this world, and especially in PowerShell, you'll always want to just basically send it always to convert from JSON, and we get an actual JSON blob back, right? So we like to keep objects themselves and to go from there. So we didn't kind of talk, we'll talk about in a second with authentication, but there is a structure for, we know in PowerShell, a bunch of stuff is that, hey, there are like environment variables always available to us, right? And so when you connect to connect AZ account, you run that once, and then there's this session variable that's out there that is a context token that is there for you. Well, similar to that is that there is a credential token that is available for you, right? And so that exists as well. And so you can, in this fashion in here, we're going to set AWS credential, is to say that it will always use the credential from this AWS profile. And so now I don't have to like put profile at the end of my stuff anymore, because it says, well, I'm setting that, putting it in the current context, and it will then live there. Similarly, you can say, hey, set the default AWS region, so that anything you're doing and it needs a region, it's always going to use that region. That doesn't mean that you couldn't, change the region, but there is that option to basically set it globally. Right. So one of the other things that we're going to do is that we can look at what are all the credentials that are available to us. And here's a good example of what that looks like. There is a thing called profiles, and we'll get to that in a second. But in doing some of this perspective, I did create, and if we get to there, we can talk about the details. But this idea that you can have, why is this important? This is important because when you are in this console, there is a reason why you'd want to, hey, I'm going to launch this account using this permission set. I'm going to be an admin when I connect to this account, right? Or I need to connect, but I only want to connect using least privilege. So I want to jump into this account. I need to do some work, but I only need to be a read only. Or you can even, now I'm saying that in my world of like, as an admin, I need to do this, or I can also then grant access to some developers or even an auditor and say, hey, you have access to this, and here's just the permissions that you have access to, right? That's what these permission sets, I've always, kind of referenced them as like roles. It kind of makes it easier for the person to understand. It's a role, but effectively it's a permission set. So this is what permissions, this is just a name, just a word. So it doesn't do anything. The fact that we call it developer access doesn't mean anything. It's just a label. But underneath the hood, there is a specific set of identity policies. There's policy documents that kind of put this permission set together, and then that's what connects to this account. It's not really conducive here. Don't think, yeah, in this example, I just basically spread it across the environment. But in some environments, you would say, hey, this account, you have administrator and you have read-only. For this account, you have developer. For this account, you have no admin. This one has read-only. So there is that structure, right? Especially if you have a fair number of accounts, you would probably not have it across all of the accounts. Me being an admin at this point, and I created it and just made it simpler for me just to say, make it across all of them. Coming back to the console itself, there is a structure I'm going to get to. I think we're going to look at. No, I think it's the next one. The next one we talked about. And where's my account? You know what? We're just going to jump to it. Code. So this entire list looks like a bunch of stuff, right? So it's just a bunch of, it is all based in the shared credential file. This credential file, where does this live? This credential file gets put into your local profile and your local appdata.aws.config. Well, what is this thing we talked about? Hey, so what is your login? Well, that's this page. That's this page. This looks pretty familiar, right? So this is this SSO session, who you're going to connect to, and then just a word, right? This is just some random word going to connect to this account using this role. So this account, and that account using this name, and that's how you're going to connect. And so it creates this point so that when the credential provider or the credential component comes along and wants to use it, all the pieces are here for you. So it will look those components up. And so AWS Summit 2026, that's this one. And so any of one of these profiles can be referenced by name, AWS Summit 2026 developer. That's on here as well. And it will tell you it will tell the STS which connection we're connecting from, which account we're connecting from. Well, why is that potentially, or how is that important, or why is that important? Any other questions, or I'm asking my own questions, but hopefully we can get to that. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna jump ahead. We're gonna look at some other stuff with S3 buckets, and I think we do some of that jumping around. So at the very top of this thing, what we did is actually say, hey, I'm going to deal with multiple profiles themselves. So I'm going to work with the developer account, right? And I'm going to work with the production account, right? Meaning that I can reach into multiple accounts all at the exact same time. Not the exact same time, but all within the same context, within the same session window itself. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to stay with it. I did do this. Bucket name logs. I did this before. Yeah, so just give me the S3 bucket. I don't even know what profile I'm in. So get S3 bucket. Right, so if I use the dev profile, well, there it is. Clear screen. Let's try that again. Right. So if we specify which profile is, this exists within the dev profile. Well, what is the dev profile? Right, it's that account. It is the profile itself is back to that account that which ports back to there, right? But if we do get S3 bucket, well, I'm currently in a different profile. I'm in the management account. And so there is a S3 bucket called this inside the management account, but there is also 4 other ones in the other one. So I can reference each of those all within the same context, right? I can just reference those individual profiles. So that's kind of what we showed at this point, is that, hey, go tell me what's all the keys. All right, so we're jumping all over the place, but that's what I enjoy about these meetings. I feel no harm. Oh, because I didn't create the bucket name. That's why. Get that bucket. And we get some details. So why I also love PowerShell is that, hey, you know what? I can use all the other stuff we normally know with PowerShell. Right? Where some object equals this. You know what? We're going to chop the front end of this off. See what we get. Right? So go get me all the stuff. So this is all the stuff in the S3 bucket. These are all the items in there, and we can kind of see that they're in different folders over here on the right. And then we did this game of getting everything, where the key was this, then everything within the logs folder itself. Then I think the previous one says this actually supports like filtering left. when you're working in PowerShell, you always want to try and filter left. So what we did is we got all the S3 buckets. So, excuse me, we got every single item in this S3 bucket. So there is a potential that this thing had 50,000 files. And so we would have gotten back 50,000 objects that were there. There wasn't the content in them, but it was the metadata for it, how big it is, what it is, what's all the reference part to it. So it's not the actual content, but it is the pointer to all those pieces. But we could also just say, hey, just give me the, for the key prefix. Key is basically the folder it's in, because it's also a different paradigm now. I just want to talk about what S3 buckets and storage blob. It's all just completely flat. Even Entra, a bunch of other stuff, it's all flat. The fact that it's in a folder is just a pointer as to, hey, this is in this folder name, and that folder name. So it's all just about keys. So if you move something in S3, you're not actually moving it. You're just rekeying it to that point. You're just moving it to a different key. So at this point, we're going to go get those items, and we only got the first one. That's why it returned a lot faster too. I think I talked about jumping. What I want to talk about. Access keys. Everybody good with where we want to talk about? I want to pause. Anybody have any, like, are they deer with the headlights? Right?
So with the profile thing, you could theory, you just have one set of, you log in once, right? And then you're able to jump between these accounts because they're all under the same identity in your script. Is that correct way of putting it?
So what happens is you would single sign on, you would use an identity provider and log you into effectively this website.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this website is a thing, and then you can just connect all of them. So people are familiar with this whole structure. Now, knowing too is that you can click on one of these and get the access key. It's all the pieces. So that's what we typically see before. This is a short-lived access key for this profile, for this at this account, right? So that's what this access key would give me. And if you just dump this onto the console, hey, this is the access key, and here's the secret, and here's the session token. Well, this session token, you could also get it longer. You can get that session token for the entire part. And so you can kind of see at this point, we saw that before. I just said invoke SSO session. And then as we saw before, we said force. But why I really like PowerShell over all of them is that in AWS invoke SSO or SSO login, right, doesn't support reuse. It will always log in over and over again.
Right. Yeah.
And
okay.
But the invoke AWS SSO will refresh the token if it will just reuse this existing token if it needs to, and it will refresh that token indefinitely. And so you just need to run that again, and it will go from there, right? And so 6 hours from now, oh, I need to refresh, I just do it. If it needs to refresh, it will refresh. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? Now, we kind of even look too quickly.
One thing you can also do is update your profiles to have the AWS token expiration show next to where he's got the 0.09 seconds so that you can see how soon your token is going to expire.
Well, that's kind of fun. So actually, let's go look at
How do you, are you querying that from AWS? Or are you doing some math on the token to know when it expires?
When you do the SSO, it would give you, in one of those environment variables, it gives you the AWS environment credential expiration variable. So you could look at that and calculate based off of that expiration time.
Yeah, so I do know if we go to AWS SSO, so the cache itself, so if we just see the cache, hey, dir, or I'm gonna say, what do I want to do? So for each, again, we're here reduce. So GC full name convert So this is what's in those files. So registration expiration on that, that's that one of item. So each one of these, there's an old token. This is another one, and this is another one. So those are all the ones I have, but this is the one for AWS. Here's my Bossman. So the registration, this expires on that time. So then this refresh token, that's the client secret, and its refresh token, oh, expires there. So this guy will expire for me at 11:39. So I can use this active session and it will keep refreshing it using this refresh token over that period of time from there. So this is the current access token to go get it, but it will continue to use it. And to Clem's response is that the fact that I connect to multiple and it holds on to the cache, you'd have to figure out which one is the current one, right? Which one are you currently on? But it wouldn't be that hard to figure out, like, hey, this is the SSO, this is the start URL for the SSO session we're on. So because we are using this SSO session, we know where it's starting from. Go get the cache from this guy, then you can figure out the other parts. So it's a little magic at that point.
Okay.
You could, not like magic, but it wouldn't be that hard to generate on the fly. And so those who, because this profile is refreshed every single time we hit enter, right? And so it's calculating when the last time it ran something. And so I have another prompt that tells me what profile I'm in. I never thought to say how long my refresh token is for, but that's a good point, Clem. So that'd be kind of cool. Never thought to do that, but I could definitely do that. So I have one, if I'm actually logged in, it'll put it over here and tell me what account I'm in. All right, so that kind of talked about what those pieces are. I did want to say that there is a structure for access keys. So if you are finding stuff online, and typically what it tells you to do is says, oh, go create an IAM user, then go build an access key, then store that into a variable, and then there you go. Now you can log in because you just set this AWS credential to the access key, and Bob's your uncle, right? So actually, let's kind of quickly do that. I want to just show you just that behavior. So where's my Phil? Hey, Phil. Nope, that's not Phil. Phil over here. So what does that look like? So this is non-SSO. This is, I created an IAM user. This IAM user can do a bunch of stuff. Actually, at this point, he can create IAM locals. They can do some other stuff. So he has full access to S3. He can read only everything, and he can play with secrets manager. But then also, this is actually what an IAM policy looks like. We don't need to go into the details as to what all these policies look like, but it's just where it is. We saw before that there is an access key. So I'm going to actually delete the old access key. And the access key is just effectively, it's a username and password, but it's a permanent username and password, right? And that permanent username and password assumes this IAM piece, right? Call it permanent. When we come back to here and we get access keys, yeah, they're kind of permanent, but no, these just expire. These will only be valid for a certain amount of time. So I'm going to create back to here an access key, and it says you get a whole bunch of warnings. Don't do this. But then if you look online, they go, oh yeah, just keep on passing through. Just keep clicking, click. And say sample, doesn't matter, right? And so it automatically generated an access key for me. And you notice it's just a blob and a copy of the secret, right? So I'm going to actually take this guy first. I'm going to go back to code, paste this guy in there. And we're going to say this guy. Then we're going to just run this. So now the actual secret's here. I've never seen it where I recorded, so it doesn't really matter even if you see it. But now if I set this profile, set this credential, the get S3 bucket, they don't put anything, is back to whatever that account that Phil was in, right? So it effectively is now assuming the role of fill, but there's no way for me to understand what that looks like. And that secret lives forever, right? It's not going to expire at any time. So hit done. You've not shown it. That doesn't matter. But the point being is that, hey, it was created a minute ago when it was last used. If you refresh, it will eventually say that it is currently used, right? But the point being is that it's now permanent for this. There was an access key for this, and there's a secret key, and it just lives indefinitely. It's not the best strategy at this point. Point is, there's some other talks out there that say, don't keep access keys in permanent, let them rotate, do some rotation, do at this point. Create it, but this should be your fallback to something else and not a permanent thing, especially when the idea is that you can have short-lived identity keys that only exist for so long and just keep refreshing. It's not that hard to refresh what they are, right? And so what did it look like to just invoke the new one? Hey, I'm going to relog in. Hey, let's relog in again. Hey, it's done. Now I'm relogged in. Woohoo! So now for everything, and because I connected using a SSO session, I have access to every single profile that is available to me. But we also point out is at this point, this web interface shows me everything I'm available to me, just because my config file, if I drop some of these from here, means I just won't be able to use it anymore, right? I can't use that word anymore. It's just not available to me anymore, right? Hit save, and now it's live, and those entries just don't exist, right? So you can, hey, I have access to 100 things. Actually, I think in my work environment, I have probably like 85 different permission sets, but I only connect to like 7 of them. So that's the only ones I keep in my profile or in my config folder. So that's what I wanted to say with access keys, is it is point, and now this credential just lives, and it is what that looks like. Let's play with some files. I wanted to kind of get some easy wins there with files. Actually, you know what? I think I want to switch my default profile back to data. Yeah, because we're using the dev profile. So we're using profiles again, and you'll see a lot where I'm just jumping between different peaks. So here I can talk to one profile, and then I can talk to another profile. He's got only 1 bucket. He's got 4 buckets at this point, or 5. There's no reason why you couldn't do the same thing. Is I statically generated this list of all the different profiles that are here. Like here are the member profiles. Here are the other accounts we referenced before. Here's all the members inside of these OUs. Well, then you couldn't just, hey, this kind of looks familiar, right? So the magic of PowerShell at this point, it says, hey, for all these profiles up here, I'm going to go through each one. Go get all the buckets. Then I'm going to create a PowerShell object from that. And so now, with one fell swoop, I'm connecting to every single account that we have, tell you how many buckets are in it, and then I'm going to list out the buckets that are there. Full stop. So I can do this across an organization. How many buckets are out there? Who owns buckets? I can really easily run through a report of who has S3 buckets. So here we're playing this game of buckets, but buckets are like storage accounts, right? So here we're getting an S3 bucket, yeah. Right. We're gonna list the objects in them. Kind of saw that before, but hey, now go get those files. What files are in those buckets themselves? Where are we at with time? All right. I think I'm going to end here. Wow, this didn't get very far. Because I want to leave. So, hey, we went and got some files, right? Go get the objects themselves. Now let's go write some files to S3. Similar, exactly same point. Hey, what's the key we're going to write? Or what's the file we're going to write? The key is basically the path and where we're going to write it, right? Bucket name, and then the profile, just because we're dealing with multiple profiles. And I'm leaving the profile part in, particularly so that we can see that we can go from different folders to different folders. And let's go look in the dev. We're going to use the dev account. Let's go look. S3. What's the key we put it in? Reports April. Now we're going to change this. We're going to say May, just so we know we just pushed the A. I'm going to say May. We're going to do that too. We're going to write the same file. Hey, we just wrote it again. Now we have 2 folders. Let's see the actual bucket name. What's the bucket we're using? 2004. The reports one, right? Oh, we're doing logs. Go back. Logs 04. Reports. We did write this a couple seconds ago, but just as easily, we just wrote the exact same file up to there. So it's very easy. It becomes fairly easy to write stuff to S3 at this point. One thing I also want to point out, so fairly easy to write stuff to S3, but noting too is that it's implied here, and it's not as easy for, in my experiences, for the developers to just understand, is that, hey, I just wrote this here. Well, how, under what context, am I working? So I am living right now, and I'm SSO'd, and I'm using this profile. Well, that doesn't mean that when I log into the console, I'm the same person, right? I'm logged in as this guy over here as an administrator. Well, my dev profile is something else. It's connecting as a dev, not as an administrator. So I can hear and see stuff, but you could have a configuration. How am I actually writing to S3 as a service account, or not even a service account, a service principal, right? So I just want to point that out as well, is that it is not, there is a context in which you're interfacing with any AWS service, right? If you're, I can create a session for the credential object that is OIDC, right? I could use the exact same code and right before establish a context with GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions can do the work, right? But it needs its own identity, so it's not the same, credential. Oh, and then this, uploads a whole bunch of files, and you don't need to upload all of them, but it's that exact same thing, right? Hey, this is all PowerShell. That's the whole magic, and that's the beauty of PowerShell itself, is that, hey, once you learn how to write one file, you can write 10,000 files. You're just wrapping the whole thing. So go get me current local directory and start writing up to that path. We can say bulk upload too, right? And now what was our kind of temp folder back here in the demo data? We were writing all this data up to S3, and we're just writing it to bucket 2. Bucket upload. Hey, look, we just wrote all these files just now, right? With fair ease as far as writing a bunch of data. Similarly, before we just got the metadata at the top, we were just getting the details of the files themselves. Go tell me what's there, right? And so we didn't actually get the data in that folder, right? So we didn't get the objects, we just got the metadata for it. So similar, S3, what is it doing? Hey, where are we going to put it? And this is effectively a download. Hey, I'm writing the file, right? Download report, and that's this guy here. Actually, sample data, we're going to delete this. We're going to run this again, and you'll see that file come back. Hey, look, here he is. Right. So with, again, fair ease, we can just grab some random files. We can read an S3 bucket. Why come back to PowerShell is the magic of what it is. I can do S3 object. I can so get get command GCM star.s3 buckets. This is all the things you can do to an S3 object. Hey, you can copy them, you can read them, you can remove them, rename them, restore them, or there's a structure. I don't think I have any demos for restore, but if you delete something, there's probably, we can just do help restore S3 object. Here we go. Online. Takes me there, and I don't know what the commandlets are. I don't know what the parameters might be and all those other parts. All right, I'm just going to scroll to the bottom to give me all the examples. Wait, they don't have examples. Oh, shit. That's not good. But there's a process for it. You can look it up. And what's the process to restore an object in S3, right? My point is really why I wanted to come to that point is that what you can do with an S3 option, but also why I like it is that, hey, there's more you can actually do to an object of some kind. Hey, get the object ACL. You can do other things. But I don't know that, or here's all the different APIs that you can connect from and do that to other parts. So that's also the magic of PowerShell. Another example, I think I'm gonna here code to 35. Try to see if there's any. I want to kind of pause for a second and ask some questions. We are definitely not going to get to half of this stuff or more than it is. And that was my objective as well. I was hoping to get some more questions. Download all objects under a prefix. Well, that kind of looks pretty simple. At this point, we're going to get everything in this bulk upload folder. Once we have the objects themselves, not the data itself, well, then we just loop through those objects and then we read them. So we're just, creating a folder if we need to be, figure out what the path is, create the folder if we need to get created, and then we actually just read, get the data itself out of that object, and we write it to a file. And so this little, 5 lines, 7 lines, right, is go get the objects themselves, go get the metadata itself, and then once you have the objects themselves, then you can go get the data inside of it. So it's more of like, management plane and data plane. And so in Azure, there is a structure for that. Just because you can see the object doesn't mean you can get the data inside of the object, right? There's a management plane and there's a data plane. Similarly, hey, I just want to get the items, but of course, what is inside the items themselves is that, hey, it's just the size, it's like the size itself. So you don't need to actually tell you how big it is. Well, hey, what's inside of them and just what, hey, this entire thing is not too big, only a meg or something like that. But that's just the sample. That was the other fun thing we can do is that it is possible. There is this one thing I thought that was kind of fun is you can create a pre-signed URL inside of S3, but this is just a feature of S3 is you can see what happens, right? That means is that, hey, you have a file, it generates, you can generate a URL, an S3 URL, and what's that look like here? This is just what it looks like. It's in S3 and just all the different parts, but then there is this signature at the end of it, right? And it's only valid for 1 hour, but I pasted it into my browser and let's just go put it in the browser. And immediately we have access to whatever that thing is in AWS, right? So you can create links to files that are short-lived in S3. Temporarily, here's a link to an S3 object. To an object in S3, there's an interesting. So that was kind of one of the kind of fun little, I call it fun, just something I didn't know, right? It's effectively pre-signed URL, but it's effectively it's a signed token. It's like in Azure, it's called a SAS token, secure access signature. It's similar, the exact same thing. If you get the whole piece, how long is it good for? And it's good for so long, and where it goes from there. So it's just an interesting part. I don't think we need to go through the items of copy S3 buckets, but copy from here to there, pretty straightforward. Doesn't really, but These are just some of the things we can do. We'll go from there. Thoughts? Anybody?
I think what you're doing here is you're making yourself a nice little series. You're not going to be able to get through all the stuff in one thing.
Yeah.
So we should probably knock off one or two topics and just do that, stop. And then as we introduce these, say, the next part of our series on AWS practical administration, I think we could build out a nice little series here.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I think we just stop right now, because I think the next thing, it's kind of a fun thing is to do EC2 and Lambda. Let me think if there's anything. I jumped onto the end with like real use cases, if there's any org inventory. Org inventory was one, it was an interesting one. Or org tags, unplayed. I think S3 report. This was an interesting one. Is that you just look at what this looks like, right? Similar to what we did before is hey, all the profiles. This is just a structure, say, hey, create this function and say, go get this across the organization. So assumption is that prior to we saw this before, all the member profiles we're looking for. So here are all the different accounts I want to talk to or something to that effect, right? So we called it an account at that point, but that's just what we're going to call it. So then for all the accounts, we're then going to go get all the S3 buckets. Then for every bucket, we're going to get all the items in it. And then we're going to create a little log, total size. And then we're going to get the buckets. Then we're going to say where it looks. And so org-wise, so that's what this function is going to do. That was the S3 thing. So we're going to stop at S3. We're going to run the whole thing. Now, this is kind of interesting just because the org isn't that big and there's not a lot of files in it, but we'll simply go from there. Similar in the same, it's just PowerShell. So you could take the whole thing, export to a CSV and play the game. But because I like to keep it in the console, let's just do something slightly different. S3 report. We're going to go and form a table. Actually, we're going to do out grid view. And yeah, out grid view. Why is out grid view not working?
We must have nested objects in there or something.
Data format is not supported. What do I have inside of here? Oh, there's multiple types. Oh, it did a bunch of other stuff. It did a report and it gave the objects. Somewhere inside of this function, I outputted multiple parts. Oh, that's why. All right, well, let's just do this. Let's go look inside this file. TSV. On Excel. There we go. Oh, I know what's happened. I'm playing it I was playing with this and trying to make it pretty. I'm formatting as a table. Formatting a tables. I can't output a format table. That's why we're getting some stuff. Formatting it. And I don't think we're doing any other formatting. All right, we're gonna run the whole thing again. Shouldn't be as bad. There it goes, much better. All right, so this is just a quick report. all the items in the folder, tells me what account or profile they're in, what's the name of the file, how big the file, how many objects are inside that bucket, and how big the file is, right?
So this is per bucket or per file or?
So this is per bucket and then how big the bucket is.
Gotcha. That's why this object counts.
Yeah, object
Okay,
counts.
That's what I thought.
Right? And so, but with fairly easy, going, hey, can I start generating some reports, right? As far as what is in my buckets themselves. And, there are some tooling that can give you, some data if you go look inside the individual.
How, I know
You can look at this and go, hey, I can export this to a CSV kind of thing.
I know you're obviously working in a essentially a demo tenant and you have demo data that you put in there, but when you do this in work, how performant is it to read buckets that have thousands or tens of thousands of files? And if you're trying that's all processing that's happened on the AWS side and then it comes down at the end, right?
That's still that question of shifting left.
Yeah.
Hey, if I'm going to just get me everything, and then I'm going to do if I just need to do a count, you just need to be cognizant of what your data is, right? Do you try and do the filtering inside of AWS, or do you do the filtering on our side and go get me all the data? Which is more valuable? How much did you get, right? And so, there is some of those structures. I think there may even be some other reporting you can do. And so it's still a reporting mechanism. We talked just about, S3 at this point, but some of these similar structures you could do for CloudWatch logs. You could effectively just do some other Lambda kind of bulking some stuff. And so at fairly large scales, it's just a matter of, where your bottlenecks are, right? So I think I'm going to close out right now. I think it's a good point is to, I have a ton of more stuff to kind of talk about, but I think it's good we just come back with it another day. And then we can skip over a bunch of stuff too. We can do, skip over identity, skip over that. I think it was a key to talk about identity because I think that's something that people just don't understand effectively. And the fact, the power comes is that you can talk to multiple accounts. I can be in multiple accounts all at the same time, right? Call it the same time. We're talking to them individually, but it is one login to rule them all effectively.
If you have that, you have that access.
It's one login to rule them all to the access you have.
Right. That's what I
Right.
mean.
And so with using similar structures, I don't have a demo to set it up, but you could just as well log in once. And if that login, if the role that you're in there then has rights to assume a role somewhere else, that's effectively what SSO is doing. I'm assuming an SSO role and it has credential to assume roles in other places, all those other accounts. So if you don't have Identity Center, but you have this other structure called assume role, well, it's the same thing. You just have to use a different commandlet. It's not invoke once. It's just keep assuming. But it's all the same. So fundamentally, it's the same process. It's just a different commandlet.
Okay.
So, all right.
So I think that's we're going to wrap it up here. So those that have made it to the end, what you're seeing is the start of a series that we're going to develop on AWS. So what we looked at was identity and auth and a little bit of accessing of some S3 buckets. And so we'll keep expanding on this concept. And so thanks for coming along on this ride. And we appreciate Phil, you spending the time to share some of the basics with us and really making everybody understand that
Hey, Mike, good to see you.
that the world of AWS is not much different than Microsoft and vice versa.
Yeah. The premise is still there.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Mike? You didn't have any questions? Oh, he's not on mute. He's off mute.
You're muted, Mike.
I had to
just
call
so
him
you
out.
know.
Double mute, I was trying to be extra safe. No, you were reminding me of, when I had to work with a whole lot from the other side. But yeah, importing that old monolithic module was horrific. Hated that, took way too long. You never wanted it in your profile. Get EC2 instance metadata, fun commandlet to play around with. You get a lot of self-awareness inside your Windows EC2 instances for your automations.
When we get to EC2, that'll, that's also one of those things, and, SSM and working with some of those pieces. And so that's just another beast. And that is this fun thing of what all the things you can do for all of these pieces. So, again, with Azure and a bunch of stuff, they kind of combined it all, but, it's all individual pieces. And so playing with S3, playing with EC2, playing with CloudWatch, that is also CloudTrail is another beast. So it's a lot of fun, and you can definitely go down the rabbit hole.
All right, so with that, I think we'll wrap it up. And thank you, everybody, for sticking around. And if this is your first time joining us, we'd like to invite you to check out our YouTube channel, where all these videos end up eventually. We have about 150, closer to 200 other demos of basically anything you could think of related to PowerShell. So if you want to see more content from us or all things PowerShell, we invite you to check us out on YouTube. Just search for RTPSUG and you'll find what you're looking for. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. All right.